So, is it just me, or is guitar YouTube and metal YouTube like pretty much completely dead by this point?
Well, it just so happens that your friend here is only mostly dead. There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead. Please open his mouth. Now, mostly dead is slightly alive. Now, all dead, well, with all dead, there's usually only one thing that you can do.
What's that?
There's been a number of worrisome videos from the YouTube metal community lately. Videos claiming that metal YouTube might be dead. I also love that no one credits yours truly with predicting this in May of 2024.
Because I think this is an extremely serious problem for creator sustainability across the platform. This is really bad. There is definitely a cap on this, and I don't see this community getting revitalized anytime in the near future. It's been a trend for everyone. Views across the community are pretty much down. We may be seeing the death of the YouTube metal and rock space in real time.
Gee, it's almost like I know what I'm talking about or something. Nick Nocturnal made a video saying he'd be stepping back from making content on YouTube for a while to, quote, figure his life out. Very vague and gay shit that sounds serious, but you don't know if it's like, I need to settle my family's estate serious, or I need to play Zelda Tears of the Kingdom serious. This prompted Bradley Hall to make a video saying what everyone has been thinking for at least 2 years now.
So, is it just me, or is guitar YouTube and metal YouTube like pretty much completely dead by this point?
And this prompted Jared Dines to make a video responding to Bradley's video, this incestuous garbage that is emblematic of why it's dying. I'll be helping you fill in the gaps of what these videos missed. I really don't have much to reply to Bradley's video with, not only because he kind of just gave the audience's perspective, but also because I joined him in a roundtable of creators for quite the star-studded Zoom call, where we more than exhausted this topic. I gave a really cool presentation on there where I was a few cups deep in the whiskey. Hopefully he'll publish that video and you can see for yourselves, but we'll see. Until then, you get this presentation. Look, metal YouTube is not dead in the same way rock isn't dead. They're just calcified. I don't have a very specific answer for how to save it because, well, frankly, I don't really give that much of a shit. I care very much for the creators in this space. I care deeply about my audience who's graced me with their attention, and especially those who've graced me with their money. But I'm referring to individuals. This whole collective metal thing is just a very narrow aesthetic that has refused to mean anything other than an adrenaline hit for a very long time now. And because of that, it deserves to meet its inevitable fate. Irrelevance. You could call metal YouTube dead, and in that same spirit, this video is an autopsy. I'm going to examine each organ of this really stupid, prideful, drug-filled corpse and determine what actually killed it. And I'd like to begin with examining some key points from the videos Nick and Jared made. Please keep in mind, these aren't perfectly formed thoughts of mine, and I know these are not perfectly formed thoughts of Jared or Nick's, and we may not be articulating as perfectly as we'd like to. But before we examine those videos, I need to tell you about these great cigars. These great cigars that I was sent from Pints with Aquinas and Chesterton's. I guess it's the same thing under different names because I don't know why. Just a heads up, I'm about to talk a lot about cigars, so if you don't want to hear about that, you can skip to this time code and get back to being depressed about metal. These Chesterton and PWA cigars are under the banner, the brand, the
idiom, sir? Idiom!
Of Matt Fradd. He loves cigars so much, he helped open a cigar lounge in the tiny town of Steubenville, Ohio, and even helped launch a cigar brand to help fund that same cigar bar. I'll be sampling the cigars throughout the video and periodically checking in with you how they taste. I'm gonna be starting with the Pints with Aquinas 2 cigar. It has that little 2 on there. I don't know if you can see that or not. I meant to have my phone as a second camera to be all cheeky and like be able to hold it up to like a close camera. And then I realized I used my phone as a teleprompter like an asshole. So let's talk a little bit about this Pints with Aquinas cigar. So, I'm not reading what's in this damn thing. If I told you that something has a Corojo 99 Jalapa binder, would that mean jack shit to you? It doesn't mean jack shit to me without asking ChatGPT. So here are all of the things that are in the cigar, if that interests you. I will let you know how it tastes. All right, so first let's talk about properly cutting and lighting a cigar. So on each cigar, there's this little cap that goes on top so that it's basically the way that they wrap it and they cut it off and they put the cap on top to make it look pretty and rounded. That's also a good signal of where you're supposed to be cutting. So you go right where the edge of that cap is, which is usually not that much. Next, you have to choose what you're lighting with. You'll see a whole bunch of people with torches. I think they're lazy assholes. I'm just joking. You can smoke a cigar however you like. They're just doing it wrong. My two preferred methods are either with cedar matches, which I have here, but because there's a ceiling fan on, I'm going to be opting to be doing something even more pretentious. I'm going to be lighting my cigar with a strip of cedar. So since there's wind, I'm gonna pull it down under here so I can get a good light on it. And the first thing you want to do is actually toast the end of your cigar without drawing and without putting it directly into the flame. Okay. Normally, when there isn't wind accelerating how fast this fire is coming off of here, I'd be able to take a draw off the same one, but I'll have to light another one. Draw and twist. Wow. This is an embarrassingly terrible light. There we go. That's evened out. All right, so initial taste on the pints. There's a little bit of smoke.
It was at that moment Mike realized he was actually retarded.
Obviously, it's a cigar and I'm smoking it, but I mean, actually like a smoke earthy flavor, a little bit of chocolatey in there. It's a bit peppery. That's a pretty darn solid smoke. Do not smoke cigars unless you are 21 years or older. But all right, let's take a look at Nick's video.
The reason I started making content all the way back then was because I wanted to share music with people. I wanted to share metal, talk about it. I didn't have that really growing up. I didn't have people to talk about metal or breakdowns or 5/7/8s or guitar with that I could relate to. I was always kind of the weird one out that just, you know, I didn't felt like I really belonged in anywhere.
Okay, look, I want to start by saying I have no hate for Nick, but yeah, that sounds a little like bullshit to me. If you really just wanted a community to share nerdy metal music shit with, you could have continued to be a viewer on YouTube, or, I mean, if you wanted to be a true degenerate, you could become a mod on Reddit. But you specifically chose to create, and that takes a lot more effort than just sharing your thoughts with people. I don't doubt that you also felt isolated and separate from others to some degree, but I mean, showing other people your creations for validation is a very different story from no one in my high school like breakdowns. Like it's a little dog shit. Unless you were homeschooled for your whole childhood and have no internet privileges, this seems like a bit of a tall tale. I went to a tiny high school and there were several other metalheads in my school. Look, I could be wrong. Technically, I've heard of people who live in towns where no one else likes the music that they like, but I also know these kinds of YouTube creator people well enough to tell that there's probably a lot more self-interest to his motivations to starting a YouTube channel, but he's afraid people will think less of him for it. I only touch on this because it relates to a topic later in the video. Even if I take his story at face value, which I absolutely don't, the motivations to continuously crank out content for view maxing are typically fairly shallow. And that's why people quit, because shallow is not worth dying for.
My whole adult life has been basically broadcasted on the internet, so the little bit of space, personal stuff, family things I have, like I don't really share with you guys. And I don't think it's the space, because I always want to keep that space something positive and fun and exciting.
There's a lot of problems in the metal YouTube space that I'm gonna highlight and dissect, but I think this is the gestalt of the problem. Positive, fun, exciting. It's not that these things are bad. Follow with me here for a second. You know what these words feel. That's why you respond positively to them. These words are strictly emotional language, divorced from consequence, responsibility, personality. But have you actually ever sat down and thought about what these words mean? The first word is positive. Some define it as constructive, optimistic, or confident. The word constructive is great, but I doubt most people actually mean constructive when they use the term positive. I'd say positive in 99% of cases is another word for optimistic or upbeat, just generally feeling good. Okay, that's not bad. I wouldn't say it's amazing on its own, but not bad. The next word is fun. Amusing, entertaining, enjoyable, very similar to positive, but with more emphasis on amusement. Again, not inherently bad. And then finally, exciting, causing great enthusiasm and eagerness. This word again points towards positivity, but this time more centered around things being high energy. So to reword the fluffy, open to interpretation buzzwords he used, his content was supposed to be optimistic, amusing, and energetic. And having consumed some of Nick's content, yeah, I'd say that matches the description of what he was aiming for. You know who else matches that description? Jared Dines, Bradley Hall, Rob Scallon, Sophie Burrell, Anthony Vincent, Markiplier, Kay's Cooking, ecstasy, cocaine, marijuana, nicotine, alcohol. Those three words are just positive feelings, things you could get from a multitude of substances, and for that matter, a multitude of metalhead shredders online. Besides a nice temporary hit of dopamine, what have you actually given to someone when you make content that meets this very base criteria? And more importantly, why didn't Nick use any of these words to describe his content? Inspiring, which means to excite, encourage, or invigorate someone, especially to do something creative. Or using the classical definition, to infuse with a divine or supernatural influence, essentially to breathe into, to blow upon. Constructive, serving a useful purpose, tending to build up. Edifying, providing moral or intellectual instruction. Meaningful, serious, important, or useful in some way. Really just having to do with the stuff of life, the purpose of life. I would say some of Nick's content actually fits this bill. All the creators I listed earlier have made some content that meets this criteria. This is the point where I'm sure there are several of you in the audience asking why I need to make everything so damn serious. Why am I trying to make things that are only fun overly serious? You are right, not everything needs to be so serious. I agree with you. And that is not what I am pointing at. I'm speaking specifically about a problem of intent in the metal YouTube community. Is metal YouTube setting out to make content with the intentions of being inspiring, constructive, edifying, and meaningful? Or is it setting out just to be emotionally gratifying? I think the answer is obvious after a surface level examination of the content. There's a fundamental problem of motivations for making and consuming metal music content. And it stems from the fundamental values and limitations of the genre itself. We're going to explore those later in the video.
I have a very unhealthy relationship with content where I will go through shit, and instead of necessarily dealing with it in that moment, 2 hours later, I'm like, all right, someone just, that's close to me passed away. Like, I guess let's go do the stream or get the YouTube video finished, which again, like, I have the most blessed job in the world, and I'll never take that for granted. But I've never taken that proper time to just absorb things like that, like a normal, I think, human basically would.
I'd say most content creators have an unhealthy relationship with content to some degree, some more than others. I don't want to minimize the hard family moments he missed or didn't process properly, but if you look at his channel performance as of late, I think this will more holistically complete the picture of why he wants to step away. All right. First place, let's pop over to Social Blade. All right, so taking a look at Nick Nocturnal's Social Blade here. If you look at monthly gained subscribers here, it looks like back in 2022, before the big thing popped off for him as huge as it was gonna be, looks like he was pretty consistent, sitting just under 20,000 per month, which is huge, that's amazing. Then it popped like way up to double that for a couple months, actually, yeah, almost like a half of a year. Then it started to mellow out a bit, and then, you get these plateaus as a creator after your big bump, and then you wanna see like that big boost again, right? And then it looks like things kinda were petering out for him on the sub side over the last year or so, I would say, maybe a little bit more than a year. I wanna make sure I'm not trying to like dunk on him or anything. My stats are way effing worse. All of this is data collection to point towards motivations. So let's look at monthly gained views. Honestly, looks better than what the subs do. So if we come over here, he's looking at about 4 million to 4.5 million a month, pops way up to almost 10 million, looking for this part of the year, somewhere between 6 at the lowest and then 9.5 at the highest for over a year is ridiculous. And then if you come over here and look at the view counts, they look a little bit better, though not amazingly better than what he was prior to that huge jump in views there, but I'd still say that's a net positive. Now this is total monthly views, so this actually isn't telling the entire story. So if we come over to his channel and check out the video tab, the views he's getting as of late, except for the one where he's stepping away from YouTube, which is 544,000 views. It's a little scattershot. Some of the better ones are in the hundreds of thousands, but then like this poor damn thing, Mosh Pit Wedding is crazy, only had 20,000 views. Like, look, this is not a Nick problem. That is a YouTube problem. Even if you put that in front of 10 random fans, at least 5 of them would click on it out of sheer curiosity. At least I expect they would. Like, that's wild. That's not a Nick problem. But okay, like these aren't horrible views, but I wouldn't say that they're like dominating the internet views. And Nick was definitely in a spot of dominating the internet. Let's take a look at the popular ones. Popular ones are breaking the millions. And if you notice, they're all from 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago. You need to scroll down a while before you finally hit one that was published in the last year. Falling in reverse, Ronald is heavy. Almost 600,000 views from over a year ago. It looks like it's not even in his top, or it's like barely in his top 50. I wanna make sure I am very clear. I am not saying Nick has fallen off. Those are still incredibly impressive numbers. This is really more to say, if you look at the kind of content he's making, he's made essentially the same kind of shit for the last 5 years or so. And over the last year or so, he's been seeing some substantially diminishing returns. Like I said, granted, the views are still really close and a little bit up from before he had that major blow up in 2023. But when your subscriber count has doubled in size, that isn't much of a consolation to your brain's reward system, especially when you're used to getting these like huge maximum videos. This isn't the point at Nick specifically. This is a massive problem across metal YouTube. Again, I already examined some of that in my video talking about Finn McKinty. That will be linked in the comments or the description below. I don't know, it'll be somewhere below. But to boil it down quickly, it's a synergistic problem. It's the calcification of metal meeting the content siloing of YouTube. Not only are there less things to talk about or make that are relevant to audiences, but you have a covalent pressure from YouTube making sure you only talk about those bands whose relevance is constantly waning. Otherwise, you get punished. Okay, we're about to talk about Jared's video, but first I wanted to give you some more thoughts on the Pints with Aquinas cigar. Yeah, it's a good smoke. I will say I'm not in love with the draw right now. That could be partially my light. It is a tighter packed cigar as well. When I do take a moment to get like a hard draw out of it, the smoke is very satisfying. Yeah, it's definitely on the drier, muskier, a bit spicy, kind of woody, earthy side. I like it. Okay, next up, I'm going to try the Chesterton. Okay, here is the data on the Chesterton, which is actually almost all the exact same leaf, except for it's layered differently, which is interesting how much that changes the flavor profile of a cigar. Okay, I lit this one off screen to make sure that I get a, hello. I got a better light. Man, that flavor is so much creamier. There's a little bit of sweetness in there. I really like that. I really like this wrapper. This draw is substantially smoother. Yeah, sorry, Matt. I like the Chestertons better, man. I've always enjoyed a good creamy cigar, and I do like my cigars to have a really easy draw on them. The Pint cigar is great. Don't get me wrong. It's a wonderful cigar. I just prefer this one. And this is more like medium mild. It's not a full mild, which is also something I much prefer. If you want to learn more about these cigars, there will be a link in the description for you to learn more. Okay. Let's take a look at Jared's video.
Has guitar YouTube and metal YouTube gotten stale? I mean, yes, a little bit, right? It's like everything. When something is new and being done for the first time, it's exciting, right? People pay attention. It's like anything else. Once it's been done for 10 years, 12 years, 15 years at this point, it kind of becomes stale and boring. That's just the natural flow of how things work.
Jared is tapping into one of the fundamental characteristics of entertainment. Surprise. I had a bunch of people push back on me when I brought this up in my review of Parasomnia. That's Dream Theater's latest record for those of you who have been laid before. But I still stand by this, and I'll probably elaborate what I mean by surprise in a later video. But the aspects of surprise that Jared is pointing to in this regard are novelty and spectacle. Basically how new or inventive something is and how much attention it can draw. Seeing metal guys do metal things online in 2012 was very novel. The most video we had of metal was either music videos, concerts, or like Metalocalypse.
What's this place called?
This is, I believe, called food libraries. Food library.
Seeing skits comparing different genres or sharing inside musician jokes that we didn't even realize were there and existed was really cool. It was like saying the thing that we were all thinking, but no one had really presented it in that way before. Like, I'm really happy Jared did that. That was such a good community binder. At the same time, seeing the rise of the online shredder garnered a ton of eyes to what seemed to be the few elite. And this gave more people in the audience greater access to very fast and extreme guitar playing than ever before. This promulgates a new generation of people who also want that attention on them because they thought what that shredder did was really cool. So the success of these shredders online caused more shredders to enter the scene, and then you start to get saturation because competition got higher. And because the competition got higher, the phrasing and expression needed to be even more different to separate yourself from the crowd. This is just a quick example of novelty and spectacle, and in Jared's defense, yes, in most entertainment lanes, there has to be some level of novelty to keep audience interest up. But I don't think the novelty in and of itself is enough to sustain, and spectacle is usually just a cheap trick that means you have to be even more crazy and even more extreme the next time to get that same dopamine hit of spectacle. This does not make spectacle or novelty bad, just that you need to respect them for what they actually are. They are tools for garnering attention. So if these are both tools for garnering attention, but the attention isn't the ends themselves, many content creators just shuddered at the thought, then what ends are the tools of novelty and spectacle supposed to achieve? And I think this drives more towards the actual problem. It's partly a problem of intent, like I mentioned before, but I think it's also a problem of the genre of metal itself. What is that thing that metalheads gather around and share together? Well, it seems like much of that is common experience. When a new track drops by Metallica, expect tons of creators you like or hate to drop a video reacting to it. They know it will get tons of views, but those videos get tons of views because Metallica is a cultural touchstone, an institution, something so common to the metalhead experience that it's a point of reference for a ton of people. Common experiences like these become the glue which binds the community, in quotes, together. But what happens when these common experiences grow old and become predictable? What's the next common experience? If your genre is calcified, can you have a next common experience?
Another element of this too is that a lot of musicians spend years trying to be heard, but then once people are listening, they have nothing left to say.
Yeah, this is a problem, again, of intent. What is the mission of the musician? Now, some would say it's to be heard. Okay, but how do you know that what you have to say is worth hearing? We've been sold a lie by modernity that self-expression is a fundamental good unto itself. It doesn't matter what you're saying, as long as you're saying it, then it's good. As though being heard were the most important thing to the human experience. If an artist or a creative person has some kind of mission they're trying to fulfill, if they have some sort of aim, they'll typically lose direction or guidance when that mission is accomplished, right? So if your mission is only to be heard, what comes next after you've finally been heard? What the hell does the dog do with the car once he's finally caught it?
You know, I've been there for sure. You spend years and years and years trying to build up your YouTube channel, and then once you have a huge following, you've done all your content that you've really wanted to do. You've said everything that you really want to say. There's not really much left to say, and so you kind of have to start forcing content that isn't natural to you. It isn't what people fell in love with you in the first place for, right?
Okay, this introduces another problem. What if you've just said all that you have to say? What if there's nothing left to be said in general? Similar conundrum with a different origin. But this begs the question, why do you feel the need to keep creating if you've said everything you need to say? Maybe this idea of I just want to be heard and I'm doing this for the community are merely smoke screens for the actual culprit. I want more attention, please.
Reinventing yourself again and again and again is incredibly hard to do no matter what field you are in. And a lot of content creators just they don't really know how to do that. Going back to 331 E-Rock, I don't know if you guys remember him. He used to do metal guitar covers of like huge Disney songs, and the videos would get like 5 to 10 million views a video because it was really fresh, it was new. I mean, this was back in like 2012, 2013.
Again, Jared is saying fresh and new, meaning novel and spectacle. The spectacle is contrasting these seemingly opposite things, Disney music and metal, and making them work together. But after you've made it through some of the more popular Disney songs, people pretty much know what to expect. Once the surprise is done, you can't go back and do another version of Let It Go in the style of metal. And I think another issue when talking about things like metal covers of X thing is so many of them just aren't actually that great. Like, they're usually not bad, but they are very rarely legendary. The whole point of people coming to watch it is to satisfy the curiosity of the premise presented. These two opposite things mashed together. But once the curiosity is satisfied, is it fulfilling enough of a piece of art to stand on its own? Can it work without the spectacle? Albums like Dark Side of the Moon, Revolver, Led Zeppelin 4, Thriller, all these albums had substantial amount of novelty and spectacle. But they had something else, that unquantifiable substance. There are YouTube metal covers that people keep going back to. In my humble opinion, the Rachad EB covers of the Undertale soundtrack are some of the greatest examples of the metalized version adding something substantial and satisfying that the original didn't have. But this is a rare case. If you had more of these metal covers being worth people coming back to, I don't think we'd be as worried about novelty or spectacle. I think most metal covers simply were not good enough on their own. And in general, YouTube is a place that fosters disposable FOMO content. Gotta make sure you're getting quick to the latest and greatest thing, and then next week there'll be already something more latest and greatest than the previous one. It incentivizes cheap thrills fast, not long-lasting substance. All right, last break here to talk about this Chesterton cigar. This guy is beautiful. I really like him. As it goes down, the character builds a little bit more. You know, as you get the flavor more develops, it burns more evenly, and then the tar also starts to come through the leaves a little bit. Focused on the earthy, but a little bit creamier. And there's even a smidge of spice in there. Not a whole lot, but it's subtle. Yeah, I dig this guy. This guy kills. And like I said before, if these cigars interest you, you can find out more about them at the link in the description.
I think a lot of creators are comfortable now. They have a bit of success and money and get lazy. That's me. I'll admit that that has been me many times. Complacency is the death of creativity, 100%. When people start getting the success and the money, resting on their laurels is the term, I believe. You kind of, you know, if you're not passionate about it, if you really don't have anything left to say, it's tough to like really stay motivated. If you don't have that passion, like you need to have that passion for what you do.
This clearly says to me that the mission was not to give to others. It wasn't to instruct. It wasn't to help the world open its eyes to the truth. The mission was just to satisfy yourself, whether that was through mass validation of your own expression or accumulation of status and wealth. So Jared finally says the quiet part out loud here. Like I said earlier, if you accomplish the mission you were seeking to accomplish, which at least subconsciously was acquiring money and fame, then it will appear as though you're resting on your laurels because you already got what motivated you to begin with in the first place. The only incentive to keep making good stuff is to maintain that status and money. To be clear, I don't think this was Jared's only motivation for making content. It's not anyone's only motivation for making content usually, but it was probably the primary motivation at some point in his career. This is not to point fingers. We are all guilty of this. Let's even grant that someone did have the purest of intentions while making YouTube metal content. Just how much is there to really say about metal? Whether it's commentary like what I do or making metal music, the question is the same. There's a finite amount to say about metal because frankly, it's not actually that interesting. Let me break this into two categories. We got making music and we got music commentary. I would even say that making a cover is almost its own form of music commentary. It kind of qualifies because you are making a reference back to established IP. But okay, what limits metal in a music making capacity? Well, its aesthetics are fairly narrow. Sonically, it's mostly centered around anger and power. You can do variations off of those two main expressions, but fundamentally, metal will stay tied to those two expressions. That's an exceedingly narrow lens through which to observe the world. Some might even call it depressingly myopic. As a metal enjoyer, I get that that's not all there is to it, and I understand why people enjoy metal. I enjoy metal. But metal really is a fairly narrow and limited genre and expression compared to other genres. The range of human experience is a lot more broad than this, and it seems like the more modern metal leans, it seems to be more mechanized and nihilistic, which is divorcing itself from what most people practically experience, which is blood, soul, and purpose. The moment you try to include more aesthetic qualities under the umbrella of metal, you could be breaking too many conventions, and then you run into a combination of other problems. Established fans might reject your innovation as not metal. Trying to make something different usually results in a niche style of metal, which usually bifurcates fan bases instead of unifying them, while also alienating outsiders from becoming new fans. If what you're introducing is so foreign to the definition of metal that it barely resembles metal music, then where are the limits of the definition of metal music? These factors, combined with content consumption being more and more siloed today than ever before, makes the fandom very gatekeepy. You have these very extreme niche genres and bands that will naturally appeal to less and less people. The moment people try to start writing metal that is more mainstream or attempting to be relevant outside of the established fan base, you say, that's not real metal. And because of that, the growth of the genre is very limited. No one outside of us crazy autists actually gives a crap about this weird genre, and people are right to look at us slightly askance. When the only fresh thing you are allowed to do is bring yet another flavor of extreme that is more extreme than the last one, the extremity, the excitement becomes boring and predictable. When everything is at 10, 10 is the new 0. So what does that leave us with? Well, it leaves us with Old Reliable. Metallica, Slipknot, Sode, the same stuff we keep going back to the well for as content creators because we can't help ourselves but get that sweet, sweet attention. Guilty as charged. We keep going back to those tentpole metal bands who garnered the highest amount of fame, and no newer band has matched that fame since. And those newer bands probably never will. How do you redefine metal so that it relates to all of these established bands of the past, but also is novel and relevant enough to create buzz and grow the fandom? How does a new metal band create tons of buzz outside of the metal community? I just don't think it's gonna happen, to be honest. Metal is defined by extremes, and pushing things to extremes will result in more people falling off the more extreme you get. But the opposite problem is that there's so many flavors of popular metal that have already been done before. How do you make one that isn't just a retread of the old stuff, but will also be accepted by established fans? Again, gatekeepers galore. It's a really complicated problem I don't think anyone's actually going to solve, and that's just on the music making side. On the commentary side, whether that's using your words like me or doing the 20 greatest Metallica riffs and drop C, we run into much the same problem. All this commentary requires third-party content to be referred to. And as I just explained, there isn't enough highly relevant third-party content being released. We have to wait until one of those big tentpole bands releases new music for metal YouTube to magically be relevant again, which is incredibly sad and kind of debasing to our humanity, to be honest. The new bands making third-party content don't generate the same level of buzz as the old acts for the reasons that I listed above. And because we've gone back to the well of established artists so many times, new audiences are getting burnt out. There is only so much one man can say about James Hetfield's guitar tone. There's only so many Megadeth solos to play in so many different styles. And this will naturally tend towards burnout if you force yourself to be a metal YouTuber as your job. We're exhausting all the material that actually gets views, and the new material, aka the new bands, simply don't have the draw of the legacy bands. It's just what it is.
Also, what happened to collaboration? I mean, like, my entire channel is collaboration. I love collaboration. And my biggest videos are hands down when I collaborate with a bunch of other musicians. I love it. Lately, I feel like I reach out to other creators all the time and, you know, ask them, can you want to participate in this video? Even shred collabs and stuff like that. And 90% of the time, they'll be like, yeah, sure, that'd be awesome, cool, whatever. But then they never send me their parts. They don't do it. And so it's like, back in the day, the willingness for people to be involved in the growing of themselves and the community and making interesting content seemed so much more active than it is now. Nowadays, it feels like people just kind of don't care. And that might just be the exhaustion of doing this for years, where they're kind of like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm just not feeling it like I used to. Again, complacency kills creativity, and being overworked kills creativity as well. If you're feeling overworked and you have nothing in there and you have to sit down and be creative, it's not gonna happen.
I pretty much completely agree with Jared on this point. And I think there's one unifying idea that all of his thoughts are kind of traveling around together. Considering how exhausted content creators can get from all the production they have to do for their own stuff, what is the realistic return on investment on collaborating with someone else? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Can I be using this time contributing to someone else's video more wisely for my own stuff? I don't have an opinion on this one way or the other. I think there's drawbacks to both extremes, but in general, I definitely agree that collaboration has decreased, and that's hurting metal YouTube, or at least is a symptom of its inevitable death.
So, how do we keep people interested? How do we revive the metal guitar world? And, you know, there are a lot of creators out there that are doing really cool content, really good content. I'm not saying that like there's no longer good content. There's still a lot of good content coming out. But I definitely agree that it's gotten a bit stale. So what can we do to make it more interesting? I don't know. I mean, involving the community, like creating an exciting environment for the viewer. Cliffhangers. Who's gonna win this contest? What's gonna happen in part 2? Who's he gonna get this year for the Shred collab? You know, doing public events for the local music community.
With all due respect, I don't think that is remotely enough. This seems to me like trying to reinvent different kinds of spectacle. It's almost like a guy being like, hey, guys, we want to keep serving more leftovers in our restaurant. Now, we've deep fried leftovers, we've baked leftovers, we've microwaved leftovers, and for some reason, our customers are getting bored and our chefs are losing passion. Quick, we have to find a new way to heat up leftovers. I think the issue is, it's leftovers. We're just putting a Band-Aid on a bigger problem.
Following someone's story, which is another thing I actually think is an issue lately, is that really just isn't someone new. There really isn't someone fresh that has broken out into the guitar metal world that makes content that people can follow.
Even if there was a new face, what can they do that hasn't already been done? How much further away from the human experience must we traverse to get the next dopamine reward for the novel and spectacular?
All right, so this is something that I mentioned earlier that I really want to touch on. And that's, I think when a creative person first starts out, there aren't any high stakes, really. Like you have 0 followers, 0 subscribers, whatever. You have total freedom to create whatever fun and exciting thing you're passionate about. But what can happen sometimes, probably oftentimes, is that as a person builds a platform, builds an audience, then they become aware that they now have a name or a reputation, right? There suddenly becomes this pressure, this element of, okay, I need to make a certain type of content now, or else my audience will get mad at me, or else my audience will stop watching me. Whereas at the beginning, you didn't care what other people thought because it was just you authentically putting your ideas out into the ether. And 9 times out of 10, those are people's best work. It changes the place you create from in your head, you know? You start checking your YouTube analytics every 5 minutes after posting a video and seeing how good it's doing compared to how good the last one was doing. What are the comments saying? Does the audience like it? Do they not like it? Whereas before, when you were creating what was from your heart, that's really what connected to people, and you didn't care if they liked it or not.
So what Jared says is true, and it's actually worse than what he's making it out to be. Not only is there pressure from your audience, but due to how YouTube sifts through content and serves videos, You are algorithmically boxed into certain kinds of content. This is why if you're a channel that's known for making awesome metal covers, usually people will advise you to make a separate channel for clips of your live stream react content. I went into detail about this in my Finn McKenty video that is linked in the description or wherever I linked it. This is yet more pressure from opposite directions that is killing creativity and leading to burnout. It compounds upon the other problems I talked about earlier. Why take a chance on trying something new or talking about an up-and-coming band when there's a very high likelihood you'll be punished for it? In the past, creators could get away with taking more chances with content. I think that had a lot to do with YouTube placing more weight on the popularity of a channel instead of the kind of content they made. And this wasn't just because Jared and I were smaller channels. It was because YouTube would actually serve our weird and outside the box ideas to more of our core audience. So this leads to a death spiral of burnout. We're afraid of being filtered out of people's feeds, so we don't take the chance of trying something new. So we play it safe and make sure people like it, but they get bored because we're doing the same stuff over and over again, and then we start to filter out of their feed. And the cycle continues until you've had enough and need to stop. It is actually much worse than what Jared described.
So why does it feel stale? There's not much happening. There's a lot of complacency. There's not really a new generation that's coming out and doing really new, exciting, interesting things. A lot of content is copy-pasted from stuff that I did 10 years ago, stuff that Stevie T, stuff that Nick Nocturnal did 10 years ago. You know, people think, oh, well, you know, Sleep Token and Spirit Box and Falling Universe are huge right now, so I have to react to all their videos. And yes, they do get views. But the problem with that is that no one's taking chances. No one's doing anything exciting. You know, like, take a chance, man. Like, do something interesting. If you actually are genuinely passionate about creating content and you want above and beyond what other people are doing and create interesting stuff and entertain people, you have to do stuff people aren't doing. And I don't think a lot of people are doing that now.
I'm skeptical that there really are more new things that can be done in the existing paradigm. I'm trying something fairly new. I've been talking about this music objectivity series for a while, and yes, I'm still working on it, and yes, I understand that you're upset with me for not having it done yet. That's totally fine and reasonable that you are not happy. But because my priorities in my life have shifted, I need to make more money than what YouTube was paying me. Because of that, my channel has had to take a back burner. Higher quality videos and content require more amount of time, but when you need to take more time, you post less, and when you post less, you don't make as much money. So that's just kind of the way it is. But I'm still here, barely posting, but still posting. And if you want to see a sneak peek at the music objectivity thing I've been working on, check out my last 3 videos, the Opeth album review, the Dream Theater album review, and Rick Beato exposes music education. Not everyone totally got it, and that's fine, but I got a lot of comments telling me that this is the kind of thing that people have been hungry for. Commentary with more substance instead of just like, this was sick, bro. Or that was totally lame, bro. Or for that matter, people faking excitement because they know that the audience wants to see them excited. That's the worst thing. I want to level up the discussion around art so that we can level up the art. I'm also working on a new concept record with my band. I'm actually kind of nervous about it, specifically because I'm taking quite a few chances, and I hope they pay off. It's going to be quite vulnerable and sincere, words I don't think get thrown around a whole lot in the metal community. It's coming along slowly but surely, and I'm sorry it's taken this long, but it will be finished, I promise. And hopefully, in some ways, it will be novel. But I intentionally also want it to be quite familiar. I would like it to be accessible. And I completely understand if people would say I'm a terrible example of trying to do something new because I've pretty much stopped posting. Some might say I've given up or failed because I'm not a full-time creator anymore. And I think that's actually a huge part of the problem that never gets addressed. Culturally, we've conflated being a professional musician with being a real musician, or even being a good musician. When you demand that making money at something, or making it your living, is the bar to entry to being taken seriously in art, you fundamentally disordered the priorities of art. Taking chances, like Jared has mentioned, requires the risk of failure, embarrassment, and apathy. It requires a level of honesty to look at something for what it really is, not just how you feel about it, or how you think the audience is going to feel about it. When you're worried about money coming in order to pay your bills and live your life, because those should be higher priorities than the art, then worrying about the audience potentially changes your ability to be honest. And by extension, it could hurt your ability to tell the truth. I am not saying it's bad to be a professional musician. On the contrary, it's good to have professionals who are elites in the field and are dedicated to making awesome stuff. But there are people who aren't professionals who also have important things to say. And no, I'm not just saying that because I'm no longer a full-time creator. I genuinely believe this. It is good to encourage those people to keep cultivating the craft of harnessing aesthetics to point at realities of the human condition. On top of that, it's also good to give elites the grace and time to step away from creating, to go and live life, to grow like, you know, normal people. I mean, one of the things people love seeing is how creators develop as people over time and as artists over time. Maybe some viewers aren't always invested in each step of your journey. That's to be expected. Maybe that also means a creator isn't completely defined by metal music. Maybe it's actually bad to be completely defined by metal music. Maybe metal music is just one cool and interesting part of the greater person who you are. And if we can't give grace to creators to step away and grow so that they have something new to say, so that they have seen something new that they need to share with others, then they will stagnate and burn out. Because when you step away, you risk people saying, you were never actually a real musician because you're a failure. It's a complicated paradigm that I'd like to explore more later, but I think this is one of the reasons why creators set out to have status and money as a defining goal of why they make content. Because that status meets society's arbitrary standard of what a real creator or a real musician is. And that's really unhealthy and detrimental to art. Fundamentally, our culture hasn't armed us with any sense of purpose other than acquisition of attention in things, or simply manifesting your will into the world. Unless you have more goals to obtain or games to win, eventually you realize that such a system is just a hamster wheel of your own making. So for better, more substantial art to be made, there needs to be a better and more substantial purpose to making it. And this is the death knell of metal YouTube. We don't actually have a higher purpose for making any of this shit. We're just dopamine merchants for our audience, and YouTube is a dopamine merchant for creators. I would like to be a part of building something better. Not for the metal community, but for how we can discuss and make music as a whole. Metal is a piece of that, and it's an important piece of that. But the first step towards saving metal YouTube is recognizing that there's more to the world than metal music. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love you all. God bless.